Genshin Impact is not a game I thought would ever grace my library, much less one that, after only months of playing, I would hold in such a high regard. My only knowledge of this game originally was gacha gambling and Mona fan art. Within the first hour of playing, I realized just how deep the ocean was, when I thought it was merely a puddle. This game hooked me immediately. Fun elemental gameplay, a beautiful and uniform art style, characters with distinct personalities and appearances, lore deep enough to rival Elder Scrolls and Dragon Age, and a vast open world densely packed with loot, resources, enemies, and quests. As we close the book on Inazuma, preparing to open Sumeru, I'd like to give a mid-game review of the journey so far. This is one of those games that doesn't bother itself with hyper-realistic textures, but still winds up with an end product that is drop-dead gorgeous. I think one of the biggest reasons for this is its uniform design. Standing atop the Jade Chamber and looking out towards Guyun Stone Forest, Dragonspine, and Qingyun Peak, you notice that nothing looks potatoed out. A lot of games save resources for things in a small radius of the character by turning a building one block away into a flat, low-poly mess. Genshin uses this same theory, but its design is so uniform in its cartoonish style that even things at the distance look as if they're fully rendered, because even unloaded textures far away still look close enough to their fully loaded versions. In truth, for a game released at the birth of the 9th console generation, the draw distance for mobs and resources is merely on par. But far more than textures, the game's biggest triumph is its lighting and volumetric fog. I'll just let these shots speak for themselves. Genshin's base gameplay loop is really simple in truth. Throw out some elements, mix them together, press the attack button, rinse and repeat. It's remarkable how much mileage this game gets out of such a used up concept, but it's the unspoken complexity that makes the combat so engaging and prevents it from being a mindless hack and slash. You could simply build out the 4 starting characters, nothing more, and still have a reasonable experience. But the more you play around with characters, elements, bursts, skills, combos, teams, the more the game rewards you. And no, it's not just about meta min-maxing and focusing on how quickly you can drain a boss's health bar. While that is fun and oftentimes necessary, this game's combat is far deeper than just nuclear builds and efficient team rotations. Beto's Tidecaller shines best when you time it perfectly to reflect an attack, guaranteeing the maximum crit damage. Yanfei is best when using her skill to grant her Scarlet Seals, reducing the stamina cost of charged attacks, which are buffed by her burst. Lighting grass on fire, absorbing the burning damage, and parrying it isn't the best use of those characters' abilities, but damn is it fun. I got very far in this game with a disjointed team of Beto, Yanfei, Jean, and Yelan. Anyone with half a brain in this game tells you that this team is rather unbalanced, and they're right. But we can count on one hand the arenas that have given us a full team wipe. As long as they're built within a few levels of their enemies, you can play this game perfectly well by pushing the meta teams aside a bit and playing the characters you like even if they aren't hyper efficient. Even Amber, one of the most universally panned characters, excels wonderfully at her role. When you're given Amber at C0, Baron Bunny's job isn't damage. It's to pull focus when you're only minutes into the game so that you can focus on learning the game's base mechanics and the enemy's attack cycles. So for its intended function, its performance is superb. There's so much to explore in terms of combat. Just swapping one character in your team can totally change the experience. There are teams for nuking bosses, teams for exploration and traversal, teams for waves of the abyss, you name it. I've been running this group recently, and just swapping out Raiden for Beto or Kaya or Yanfei completely changes how this team behaves. And each individual character has an extensive amount of stats that can be built according to your preference. If you want to make the healer a DPS, you can do that. If you want to make the DPS a tank, you can do that. Experimenting with all of the reactions and synergies is one of the most fun and interesting parts of these types of games, and Genshin does it wonderfully. While this game suffers from the odd mismatch of tone occasionally,
and I am she who promised a dream to her subjects. Raiden A.
The audio design is solid.
To oblivion.
Elemental sound effects are punchy with the right mix of high and low tones. Environmental sounds like Serai Island's thunder, Liyue Harbor's waves, and Windrise's breeze make the ecosystems feel more open and alive. Slimes go squish cutely, Vishaps roar powerfully, footsteps on grass, stone, or wood sound nice. And the music. This game is optimized extremely well. Given that it can play in full on mobile, that's a triumph by itself for a game as big as this. Playing on even a simple pre-built PC will allow max graphics, and it really benefits from it. The game is locked at 60 FPS, but I've never been left wanting for 90 or 120. Part of it is likely the art style. That lack of hyper-realistic Unreal 5 textures means that even 60 FPS makes the animations look smooth and fluid. Saving resources means that the game can run closer to its maximum potential even on the most basic of phones, consoles, and computers. Genshin isn't and doesn't bill itself as a difficult game. However, it's incredibly easy to ascend the world level, which dictates enemy HP and attack strength among other things, far before you're ready. The Ascension domain now lacks the electro-hypostasis at the end, which is something I never had to deal with. For a dungeon that's supposed to be your final exam before the loot drops get better, it doesn't really prepare you for the real thing. That being said, overall, this game is the definition of easy to play, hard to master. Natural progression through the story will give you enough knowledge and resources to level your characters and weapons to match the enemies that you'll encounter during those Archon quests. In the interest of feeding the lore, mandatory missions are always considerably easier, so that the juicy plot twists are not locked behind a wall of Soulsborne level required skills. Wandering the overworld and stumbling into a boss fight or horde that you're unprepared for is at your discretion, and it's just a bonus. The only thing about the difficulty scaling I can critique is that it somewhat suffers from the same weaknesses as games like Skyrim or the Norse God of Wars on max difficulty. You can be going through the overworld having good fun battles with normal enemies that are just the right amount of challenge, and then the small world mini-bosses will two-shot you. But even this is alleviated by the ability to lower the world level at any time. So as frustrating as it can be to get stun locked as punishment for missing one dodge, the game still presents you with an answer if it's more than you can take. Pretty much every action-adventure RPG requires some level of grind, and as games have gotten bigger and more complex, so too has that grind. Breath of the Wild requires resource gathering to level up defensive tunics. Skyrim requires mining and looting to forge better swords and armor. But more so than any other game I've played in recent memory, Genshin's full experience demands you to pick up every little glimmer and fight every little mob you can get your hands on. If it breathes, you slay it for XP and drops. Even if min-maxing your stats isn't your vibe, there's still a level of grind that is mandatory. Archon quests are locked behind adventure ranks. In order to progress in the story, you need to grind. However, I don't think that this is a negative. Take Mondstadt for example. Even Tutorial Valley is an expansive, inviting sprawl of wondering, "Ooh, what's over there?" As the game steals your focus on that quest marker with tantalizing chests and puzzles, you'll naturally ascend through the adventure ranks plenty far to unlock the next quest. You'll want to explore, and with your exploration will come the loot cycle. As you ascend higher and higher and the world level increases, you'll need properly built characters. This is where the grind can turn into a slog, with bosses having to be fought several times just for one character's singular ascension. If I had a complaint, it's that grind can make these beautiful boss battles start to feel like grindy chores. At a certain point, it's easy to see them not for their unique designs, beautiful soundtracks, or compelling combat, but as simply a means to an end. I personally think the payoff of your freshly built character makes it worth it, but I could understand someone thinking it's too much. This is a very simple bullet point and has been talked about to death, but this game is free. There is absolutely zero compulsion from the game itself to spend 1 cent during your entire journey through Teyvat. You could front to back this with the 4 standard characters it gives you, and if you do want to gamble on wishes, the game gives you plenty of primo gems just for completing mandatory quests. Several thousand are guaranteed in the first 3 regions alone just from Archon quests, Road Quest, and Spiral Abyss, none of which are locked behind a paywall. I cannot claim that my account is free to play anymore. Everything moves. Hello? But even before whales had swam through my stream, I'd pulled Xingqiu and Xiangling when this account was still 100% free. And frankly, we're so used to paying $60+ for lukewarm stories these days, sliding a couple bucks into Hoyo's gaping maw to pull on a character banner, even if it's just because they're hot, is no sweat. Genshin Impact's story is a very complex tale, with threads connecting from the first seconds of the game far into the future. There are paragraphs of lore for singular weapons, dark backstories for a simple piece of coral, and I could make this section of the video twice as long as all the other bullet points put together. So let me simplify with this. The biggest strength of this game's story and lore is the characters. All the drop loot, all the burst damage, all the plot twists in the world can't hold up characters that are flat and boring. Even the small side characters you meet in Genshin have such clear voices, such distinct personalities, little quirks and mannerisms that separate them from the people to their left and right. Amber is a clumsy enforcer with a pure heart. Yanfei is an attorney whose competence and work obsession can be both gift and curse. Kujosara has her worldview shattered, but demands proof before she turns. The list goes on and on, with supporting characters having personalities and stories that are built out like a primary character. Even your floating tutorial sandwich has raised lore-heavy questions about her origin, motives, knowledge, and purpose. This is a cast that can be identified simply by the silhouette of their appearance or the silhouette of their personality and voice. Clever plot devices and intriguing mysteries are bolstered by a party of characters who are so fundamentally different from one another. Even 2 Mondstadt sisters, one being a dedicated workaholic intimidated by her own title, and the other being a faithful deaconess with dreams of the stage, are so similar, yet so contrasting. The story isn't without faults, Venti and Zhongli being literal deities who are so quick to put full trust in the random mysterious outsider sometimes feels a bit contrived. Learning about the 3 Inazumans who lost their visions could have been half as long of a quest and still convey everything it needed to. But even considering its shortcomings, as a whole, the story so far is beautiful. As I finish Inazuma, there are still so many unanswered questions, so many threads yet to be connected, but in a way that's not annoying or disappointing. It's in a way where the story is still holding all the cards and simply hasn't played its hand yet. A mysterious and powerful traveler who spends his days traversing different worlds with his sister is abruptly stopped and embattled by an unknown god. Being separated from his sibling and cast into an unfamiliar world, made even stranger by centuries of change. In searching for this deity who stole his family, he encounters a lively bard whose wine-laced smile hides the pain of a friend suffering, a mysterious penniless connoisseur whose silken voice carries the exhaustion of a lifetime's worth of work, and a traumatized shut-in who let her loss and fear control not only her, but her entire country. As the outsider wanders the plains, mountains, and islands in search of answers, the common thread he watches be weaved by the citizens are their experience, opinions, and interactions with their deities. One set of people feels abandoned by their god, another set feels confused and vulnerable when theirs falls dead, and still another set is so divided on their opinions of their god's mission that it causes a civil war. But unlike the common folk, the traveler is allowed glimpses at the other side of that coin. The Animo Archon ran away from his duty, fearful that absolute power would corrupt absolutely, and he would become the very tyrant he once took up arms against. The Geo Archon faked his death as an escape plan after thousands of years of service, and as a test so that the people could prove their independence to him and to themselves. The Electra Archon delegated rule to an oppressively programmed puppet, while she withdrew into isolation, a mistake she was so blind to seeing that only her oldest friend could snap her out of it. And yet still, questions remain. And the truth of his sister's fate escapes his grasp no matter how far he reaches out. With 3 nations explored and still so few answers, he continues his adventure, his journey, unmoved by trial and tribulation and simply moving on to the next stage of his quest. He will reunite with his sister, even if he has to trek through a rainforest and cross a desert to do so. Of course, every game has its toxicity, its corners of backseaters and naysayers. I've experienced the odd troll, the occasional hate watcher, but my experience with this community has been 99.9% overwhelming torrential downpour of support, love, and interest. Even when the advice on my builds gets a bit overwhelming, it's only out of other players' love for their characters, their builds, and their desire to see me experience this game at its peak. The interactive medium had long been neglected in its narrative potential. Video games were looked down on, which is a ship that started to turn around in the late 2000s. I think of games like Mass Effect 2, Borderlands 2, GTA 4 and San Andreas, Twilight Princess, Half-Life 2, Mario Galaxy, BioShock, God of War 3. Games with souls. Memorable characters with distinct personalities and game environments whose maps we still remember by heart. Games with a gameplay loop we could throw more hours at than a Game of Thrones binge watcher or a fantasy footballer. They were a collection of campfire tales, the tales of cops and robbers, spacefaring explorers, and knights that slew dragons. These games weren't just games. They were everything great about film and TV, but in a world that you could explore yourself and immerse yourself into. Genshin Impact lives amongst these pinnacles of video gaming. It has story, it has combat, it has charming protagonists, it has complex villains. It has a vast world densely packed with enemies, treasure, puzzles, dungeons, quests, resources, all tidily placed in a gorgeously constructed collection of sprawling valley, crumbling ruin, steep mountain, bustling city, and tranquil countryside. Mondstadt was the perfect starting island, easing you into Teyvat while simultaneously opening up combat, exploration, and lore in an organic way. I didn't read reviews or watch video essays prior to playing this game, and I didn't know that I was supposed to hate Inazuma. So I don't. I love it. Is it the weakest of the three? Sure. But I still thoroughly enjoyed the story from front to back and think it's underrated in the community. But Liyue was the region that really stole my heart. From start to finish, from back to front, this was a massive area with charming characters, engaging plot devices, incredible environment design, and it took 30 full streams of my playthrough and tons of play off stream, and I'm still not even close to experiencing everything this region has to offer or meeting all the characters it has to offer. I have this much to say only halfway through the released nations, and way under halfway through the game content. So the only thing I can say is add Astra Ebisosk and we will be reunited in the next video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.